Hello, welcome back to the second series of the Untitled SEO podcast. My name's Andrew Laws, and I am honoured to have a guest here today. Guest, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Paris Vega. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at the Nine Digital marketing agency and kind of an investor and co-founder in a couple other little projects.
Nice to meet you, Paris. Right, I'm going to explain what we're doing in season 2 of this podcast. We're going to call it LAN, so Live Action Networking. I've been in SEO for well over 20 years, and I know that a lot of people in SEO and digital marketing hang out and network with each other really well. And I've identified that over the years, some of the most interesting conversations about digital marketing happen during networking, during initially meeting people. Now, I live in a little town called Ipswich, which is about 100 miles east of London in the UK. And I kind of know everyone nearby now. I've been going for long enough that they all know me, I know them. So I wanted to reach out and find people in other places who I haven't met before. So each episode is a conversation, stroke networking thing. So I'm going to guess with your accent that you're not in the UK.
Nope.
Nope. Whereabouts in the world are you?
In the United States, in the Austin, Texas area.
Excellent. Well, you're the first person we've spoken to from Austin. I know a little bit about the music scene there, but not much else, I'll be honest. Are you part of the Keep Austin Weird scene, or?
Probably not enough. I've recently moved here. I grew up in Alabama for 20 or 30, 30 something years. I was originally from Portland, Oregon.
Wow.
So kind of been around a little bit, but yeah, we're relatively new to the Austin area.
Excellent. Right. So obviously you're in digital marketing, and one of the things that I always like to know is, did you fall into digital marketing, or was it a choice?
I think that it was a little combination of both because I started out as a design major. I was kind of an art student at first, and at the time when I was in college, the digital media side of art was kind of just becoming mainstream, or just kind of the early phase of that. Like, I took some photography classes and we were in the dark room developing our film. It was still like that was still happening. And I
That
guess
kind of
that's,
dates your age a little bit, if nothing
yeah.
else. So I'm getting an idea of how old you are
Yeah.
now.
And there were some people who would like turn in some digital, where like digital cameras were just out, like coming out, but they weren't like super high quality. You could still tell it was super obvious that it was digital. Especially the early digital cameras had a lot of kind of weirdly over sharp
Yeah.
pictures. It'd be almost pixelated, it'd be so sharp it just didn't look naturally sharp. And so it still had that look to it. And so it was kind of looked at as an abomination. When people would bring in their digital photography, it was like, it's not the
Oh,
true
no.
art. And so it was kind of in that time period in the early 2000s that I was in college. And so I was studying studio art, graphic design, and digital media was kind of my focus. And so I got to play around with the tools of digital media that would become kind of standard stuff for today's world, where everybody can just jump into Canva and start editing and making stuff, where back in the day you had to pay Adobe $300-400 for the latest version of Photoshop.
So are you the right age to remember using things like Letraset before digital came along?
I am not that old, I
Ah,
guess. I don't know. I don't know what that
do you
is.
know? They're like little sheets. But I'm guessing right. I now know I'm a little older than you, because
Okay.
there were little sheets that you had that were like transfers. Like temporary transfers that kids have,
Okay. We may
almost like
call them
that.
something different.
Yeah, the Letraset's a brand like Hoover
Okay.
or Electrolux or whatever, but you had to rub every single. Oh, it was awful. But yeah, when digital came
Okay.
along, I think it sounds like you were part of the Wild West. You're on the frontier of digital if you're using some of the kind of the first tools that came about, because this would have been sort of Web 2.0, as they used to call it, that sort of era.
Yeah, it was right when that was like CSS was just becoming like mainstream when I was
Wow.
getting into learning about web development stuff. And my first job on the kind of web development programming side of things, after I'd, studied art and been a freelance graphic designer for a little while, I got a job at this internet marketing agency, and they had more need for web development type work than just pure design. And so I started to learn that side of it. And my first task was just transitioning websites from table layouts to CSS layouts. Because back in the day, tables were used for the whole layout
Oh, it's
of
like
the
a
page.
table within a table
Yeah,
within a table, nested
right.
tables, wasn't it?
Tables all the way down. And, and so that was kind of how I cut my teeth in web development, was just going in, removing all tables and replacing everything with CSS.
That's a nasty job.
Well, at the time, I was just so new to all of it. Like, I had taken a class in college that was horrible. It was like HTML for the information superhighway or something. And it was horrible. Like, as their curriculum, it was just them saying, all right, create a cell, and they were just instructing you on the details of how to
Well,
make a table.
those guys were
And
only ever like one step ahead of where we were, or maybe like they were one. It was pre-YouTube, but they were one tutorial, one page in a textbook ahead of where we were trying to learn those things.
yeah, I guess so. Everything was so new. So
Mm.
the teachers, hadn't had time to really get deep into it. I mean, it's so crazy looking at the world today, because you can learn anything. Just, it's a pure matter of will to learn something. But back then it was like, maybe you'll stumble across the right book or person who knows actually what's going on or how to do something, and you really had to dig.
We didn't have the vocabulary to know how to look or where to look. So I remember things would come along like SEO for me, and I just kind of go, "What is this?" And it would take a while to actually figure out what the business tool aspect of it of it would be. So you worked fixing nested tables, and
Yeah.
then I've read a bit of your biog. I didn't want to read too much. So I didn't want to spoil the surprises.
Yeah.
But you started working for yourself fairly soon after that. Is that right?
Yeah. I actually started working for myself in college. I started to do freelance design, and I really wanted to own a business or run a business since I was a kid for some reason, just from whatever movies I'd seen, and growing up kind of, not kind of poor, really poor financially. So it was always, looking up to move upward, and, watching lifestyles of the rich and famous. I don't know if you guys had that show in the
No.
UK.
I was trying to think what films it may have been that you watched, and I can't think. But a lot of American TV, because in the UK, American TV was and still is very, very dominant. So we were living in, I grew up in called Thatcher's Britain. So I grew up where not that long after the country was so poor that we only had electricity 4 days of the week, and that seems wild now. But even in the early 80s, we didn't really have any sort of exotic food. All the food was beige. All the cliches you hear about Britain in the 80s are completely true. We weren't quite queuing up for bread, but it was not a dazzling time. So American television, watching things like The Cosby Show, Cheers, Knight Rider, Street, anything American would just seem like so aspirational to us.
Yeah.
I never really thought about whether it'd be the same if you were in America, but I guess we just thought everybody had a Trans Am.
Nope. Nah. Yeah, there's definitely the haves and the have-nots, I think, across the world. So anytime you see somebody with something you don't have, it makes you like, whoa, wait a minute.
So young Paris saw that and thought, I want some of that. And at what point, when you first started working for yourself, was it as a freelancer, or did you just pitch right into running an agency?
Yeah, I was just a freelancer, but it soon became like hiring friends to help on projects and that kind of thing. Because it seems like whenever, if you get a slightly good reputation doing something, the work comes in faster, more work than you can handle. And so it's like, hey, I can get at least a piece of this money if I hire somebody else. And so there was a little bit of that. It was up and down, but I got really annoyed with trying to collect money, because at the time I was just a college student, and I was using some of my paid work, my client work, as my school work. And I worked out a deal with the teachers and my professors, and they're like, yeah, that's fine.
That sounds very wise.
Yeah, and so I was getting paid for the work I was turning in for my graphic
I
design
really
classes,
like that actually.
my higher level.
That's really made me smile. I like that a lot.
I mean, might as well. It's kind of like how some majors would like let the students do an internship or something like in engineering. You might work at a company as part of your, you know, course curriculum, and so it just kind of evolved into that. And so I didn't start an agency intentionally at that time, but I guess that was kind of an aspiration
So
maybe at the time.
the
But
deliberate getting into digital marketing and the accidental building the agency.
well, it was really that first company that I went to work for. After I got tired of trying to collect money all the time, I wasn't
Mm.
aware of how much of that admin work was involved with running a business. There's that E Myth book. I don't know if you've ever read
Yeah,
the E Myth,
absolutely. Yeah.
E Myth Revisited, and that whole concept of the folks who are doing the technical work, the actual execution. There's like this syndrome that happens. You're like, well, I'm the one doing the work, so I could have my own business. You know, I'm the one doing everything, and you don't realize there's layers and layers of
It's
administration and all this, you know, horrible work that you are not interested in at all, but still has to be done by somebody.
well that book in particular is one of those things that I was about to ask you. At what point did you realize you were doing things the difficult way? Because everyone I've spoken to in digital marketing has this breakwater moment where they go, do you know what? I'm making my life more difficult than I need to. And for me, it was reading that book. It was reading that
Okay.
book, and the whole thing about you don't own a business, you own a job. I was like, yeah, that's quite shocking. The scales fell from my eyes, and I realised that things had to change.
Yeah. Sadly, I didn't run into that book until years later. And it wasn't until looking back that I realized, oh, that's why certain
Well,
things
no,
didn't
same
work
here.
out.
I mean, I'd been going about
Yeah.
15 years by the time I read that book.
Yeah. And so I kind of stopped freelancing for a little while or just did it on the side and just decided I'm just going to go get a job at a
Mm.
company because I don't want to have to do sales and billing collection. And so that's when I got a job at that internet marketing company I mentioned earlier, um, and built some good relationships with some folks there that I ended up doing business with for decades after. And that was just my first job out of college. And I actually worked at that company a little bit during college, part time. Um, but they did SEO. They were running ads, you know, SEM stuff. Social media wasn't out yet. Um, you could just post organically. I think there weren't like ads on Facebook when
Mm.
I first started working there. So that wasn't really a thing. And like the business world hadn't taken over social media yet. And so it was still early days there. So they were just focused on SEO, SEM, and building their little websites and custom PHP. Like they hadn't gotten into WordPress yet. WordPress hadn't totally dominated yet. And I actually helped introduce WordPress to that company, just
Excellent.
because I was still doing a little bit of freelance work. And I think that's why it's important to maybe allow employees or for employees to try and seek out freelance work because it just expands your skill set.
This is one of the precepts of my business that anyone who works for me, I've mostly got a team of freelancers and a couple of employees, but I'm keen that they explore freelancing because the amount you learn working for a company with a set number of um, of clients is finite. You know, the opportunities that come along, however many clients you've got, there is a bookend to that. Whereas if a freelancer or even a member of staff has their own clients as well, the opportunities to learn is so much bigger. And they can
Yeah,
learn things by solving problems outside of your business they bring to your business. It's kind of like free training and they're making money from it. I think it's a win-win situation.
for sure. And that's what happened with me. Got this project designing a logo and a website for a solar company, and it was actually from my first Facebook ad.
Wow.
Because once Facebook started allowing ads, I ran one for like $50 and had this little ad that had a guy punching through his laptop screen and it said, "Do you hate your website? You know, hire me, a professional designer to help you out." It was just a simple little ad
It
pulling at people's
worked.
emotions. But I got that lead turned into like a $500 logo project, and I think I charged them like $1,000 to rebuild their website totally, which is kind of crazy looking back. But anyway, $50 turned into $1,500 of work, and I just at that time was not like digital marketing focused, didn't have a marketing sense really at all, and I was like, oh, cool, I got that work, but I can't be spending $50 all the time.
Mm.
So I didn't run any more ads to get more freelance work because I thought it was too expensive and just wasn't doing the most basic like return on investment math of, hey, you got 1,500 for $50 ad. Like that's amazing. And so I just, and part of that maybe was because I was, working outside of the main job, starting a family, just had a kid.
Oh,
So there's a
wow.
lot going on, but I just did not have that marketing sense at the time. And so I probably missed out on a ton of leads that I could have gotten early days of Facebook where it was so cheap,
Yeah.
so cheap to run ads.
Even with Google Ads, I remember running campaigns and we were paying for 2-3 cents a click. It was absurdly cheap. It was almost like, well, why wouldn't you do that? Because it was
Yeah.
so easy. So what happened? When did you get switched on to the marketing aspect of what we
Right.
do?
So for years, worked at that agency, um, and for about 3 years, and then it got bought by a bigger local company, and worked at the new company for about a year. And then I was like, you know what? I don't really like this bigger corporate vibe here. This is not what I want. And so I started looking around and got a job at a smaller local agency, just being there, like website guy, helping design and build websites. And they were trying to do social media marketing. And so got a little more exposure there. And that was before, again, social media marketing was really mainstream. So you try to sell it to people and they're like, what?
What is that?
Business content on Facebook? What are you talking about? Because it was just not as common yet. And so worked there a year, and then because I had been like putting my work on my website, my personal website, did a little bit of blogging here and there. Somebody saw my work and reached out and hired me to come, or offered me a job to come work on a government contract working with the military to design some software interfaces for, it's like the software they use to manage their finances, the certain part of our military. And so I left that agency and took that opportunity, and just went into design mode for about a year. And that was a really interesting experience because it was just a totally different world where I was used to more web development and being around website designers and developers and marketing folks. And then this was like high level software engineer folks. And I just used to think software, website development, it's kind of the same, but it is not the same.
No, it very much would have been to us or people in your situation at the time. I've never worked on pure dev or kind of what would now be like offline dev, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I can see why you would have thought that. So was it a rude awakening or was it a pleasurable learning opportunity?
Um, it was a little bit of both. Because they were wanting me to learn some of the, like, what was it? .NET, the
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft programming language stuff. And I was more on the design side of things. I had just done a little bit of like PHP and HTML and CSS. And I got in there trying to learn the .NET stuff. And I was just like, oh, my brain just melted. And, and so I just focused on the design side while I was there. But it was crazy getting exposed to that. And it was really eye opening because there was like one guy on the team, one of the software engineers. And the whole time I was there for like maybe 8 months on that project, something like that. The whole time he was just working on this like one formula to make this one aspect of the software a little faster. And I was just like, what? What does that even mean? Like, what do you mean you're working on this form? Like every meeting, you're like, yep, I'm just
God,
optimizing for
the
a little more
difference
performance.
between SMEs and the people you'd worked with before and then the military, that must have been, yeah, very different. It's like I knew someone
Yeah.
who worked at a client's. He was an engineer, I can say a proper engineer. No, not that devs aren't proper engineers, but he was,
Yeah.
machines and stuff. And he got a job working for BMW, and they were spending something like £15 million a year trying to cut down 2 seconds off one of their production lines. Two
Right.
seconds. That was his entire job. Is just save us 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Because it adds up over time. Yeah. And it
Mm.
saves them millions probably. Um, yeah. So, worked different freelance jobs for a little while and then decided to start my own company. It was called the Web Craftsman. And so I partnered up with a buddy that I'd worked with at a previous company. He was deeper into development and I was more on the design side. And we partnered up, and this was when responsive web design was becoming big. And so that was kind of our pitch, like, hey, we can help your website work on all devices,
We had
wherever
there was a
people can access your website, it should work.
short period of panic. We've seen something similar with GA4 coming in recently, but suddenly everyone was like, "Oh my god, our website doesn't work on mobile devices." When we built it, there was WAP. There was no mobile internet. So
Yeah.
you found a good seam of opportunity there.
Yeah, we got a little bit of work. We did that for a few years, and then our old boss was starting a project, and we heard he needed some web development help, and so we reached out and started working on that project, and then ended up taking over our lives for the next 5 or 6 years because it grew and did well, and so we kind of accidentally became part of a startup when we thought we were just, hey, we'll do this for like 2 months and then move on, and it just grew, and that was like a truck driver recruiting business. And so throughout that business is when I really went deep into marketing and more into SEO and all that kind of stuff, because I started off on being more of a project manager, product manager side, and helping manage the designers and developers, and then moved in over the course of that project after about maybe a year or two into managing the marketing side of things. And we tested out Facebook ads and became one of the first in that industry to really use Facebook to recruit truck drivers, and saw a lot of success there. And, experimented with other formats or with other platforms. We experimented with a little content marketing, and yeah, so I got a lot of experience just managing one client that worked with, a few hundred clients itself. And so we were managing a few hundred campaigns to get leads, and then also our main kind of brand and accounts. And so that was really the deep dive and kind of a transition where I went from being more on a mix of design and dev and product manager guy into more digital marketing focus. And then that carried me into eventually getting the job I have now at the Nine, where started out as their marketing director, building the marketing department, defining the services and processes, and helping recruit the team, and then transitioning over time as we put better people than me in place at each of the positions, more specialized folks. Now I'm the chief growth officer role, whatever that means, just helping the company grow in whatever way I can. And so that's kind of the brief history that brings us to today.
It's really interesting, and I think everyone that I speak to has a slightly different path, but there's none of us are the same, and I find that fascinating. And part of the reason I was so keen to talk to you about your origin story is that you run a podcast. So your podcast is called First Customers. Or
That's
is it
right.
First Customer? Sorry.
First Customers.
First Customers
Plural.
podcast.
Yep.
And you've done nearly 50 episodes of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow. What explain the concept, because I
Yeah.
think.
So when in 2019, that truck driver recruiting project was sold, and so I had a little gap. Well, it was kind of by choice. So I talked to the boss man, and I was like, "Hey, this is awesome. We did it. We built something for 5, 6 years. It's sold. Awesome. What are we doing next? What's the next big project? The next big hunt, the next big problem to tackle?" And he was like, "Man, I'm on a non-compete for however many years, this is part of the deal. And I was like, okay. He was like, so he was kind of in cruise mode for a little while. And I was like, well, I can't hang around and keep doing what we've been doing. I gotta do something else. I was just itching to try something else and experiment and try some of my own ideas. And so I left that project and took about uh, maybe 6 months or so of experimenting and trying different things. And one of the things was starting this podcast, First Customers. Um, I went and worked with Dropify. I don't know if you've heard of that software before, but it helps drop shippers like sell stuff from all other websites and they can sell it on their Shopify store. But a buddy of ours who actually worked with us on that truck driving project at first, he was the first marketing guy on that project, but his startup just exploded. His little side project, Dropified, just took off. And so he left. And that's why I actually took over the marketing, because he
All right, cool.
wasn't available. And so after our project sold, reconnected with that guy, and he hired me to be a product manager temporarily. And I worked there for like 3 months. And then I was like, man, I've got to scratch this itch and go try to do some of my own ideas. And so spent that 6 months in 2019 trying different things, failing horribly at all of them for the most part.
Oh, but what a joy to have that opportunity rather than,
Yeah.
I
wish I could say I was joyful during that time, but it was pretty stressful. It was a big learning experience, and I learned a lot of hard lessons, but it was one of those things where I don't think I could have avoided it because of the state of mind I was in at the time. Like, I had to try these things that I've been thinking about for years. And a lot of it wasn't even clearly defined projects. It was just, I've got to try my own thing. And so I did that, start a couple different websites, projects, and just didn't give myself enough runway with any of them, because it was more of a desperate, this has to work in 1 month.
Yeah, there's the kind of the hustle side of that being useful, but there's also the stress of that, especially with any new project, actually kind of blinding you to some quite obvious facts or quite obvious truths.
Yeah.
But they say fail harder, fail quicker. I've done plenty of failing, plenty quick.
Yeah. And so I did not have the appetite, I guess, enough for any of the projects, or belief enough, strong enough conviction to go as deep as maybe they would have required. Like, I could have taken out a whole bunch of debt and just went all in, and that's what it takes sometimes. And that's actually what it took for that truck driver recruiting project that had sold, because at the start of that project, I didn't get paid for like 6 months. It was pure investment mode while we were running our other company. And we had also done a bad deal with this agency where they had a retainer with us, but if they didn't have any projects 1 month, they would just pay us regular. But then anytime they wanted to cash in that money they paid us and give us work, they could say, hey, we've paid you, so you owe us this much work.
Man, how do you resource that kind of, that's painful.
And so during that period, they called in all the chips, basically all the money they'd paid us, and had all these projects for us to do while we were investing in this other project. And on top of that, that's 2 whole jobs that don't even pay for that current moment. So we had to also do new work to pay our bills.
So you were getting like 1-2 hours sleep a night at this time?
Exactly. A lot of caffeine.
And with a young family as well. And
yeah. So that was the dark times, the darkest, I think, in my career, stress-wise, everything, family, everything. And just pushing it too far because of being stupid and making bad deals, and just not reading enough books beforehand, because in the years following those hard times, started getting into like Audible, listening to books, and just opened my mind to how stupid I was in the past. So if you're listening, get knowledge, get wisdom, learn from other people, because man, it'll save you so much pain. Because I try to look back and reanalyze, like, man, how could I have avoided these problems or made more out of these different situations? And it becomes so clear looking back as I learn better ways of doing things, or learning how other people have done things better. But yeah, so made it through those dark times, obviously, and that company sold. And so I was in that period of experimentation. And the guy that I work for now, work with at the Nine, they had this project called MyCast. One of their developers had built a side project, and I joined up with them as an investor and partnered with them. Eventually became a co-owner, and they well, now we're like the number one fan casting website. So if you search fan casting or fan casting any movie role, I didn't even know this was a hobby that existed, but people will search or they'll recommend who they want to see in a movie role. Like whether it's
Oh, fan
Oppenheimer or
casting.
Barbie.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll say, "Hey, I want so and so to be Barbie or somebody else to be Oppenheimer or whatever," and they can make a list of all the roles in a movie and all the actors they would want to see in
So is
those
this
roles.
mycast.io? Is that it?
Yep, that's us.
Yeah, you're number one. They just
Yeah,
you probably already know, but yeah, your SEO, you're number one in the UK as well as states.
yeah, it's pretty dominant SEO wise, all over the place for all millions of keywords related to that topic. And yeah, that was one of those things. Just happened to meet the right people at the right time and heard about this project. And when they started to show me, even back then, it was like 2019, so the traffic wasn't as nearly as big as it is now. But even back then, I was like, man, this has got some traction. And ever since they had launched the site, it was kind of a steady, just growth chart. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but this is something. Like, this is interesting. Like, people care about this. And so that's why I got involved and helped make some changes that helped, increase that growth rate a little bit. At first, we were experimenting with stuff I'd done before, like, hey, let's try some Facebook ads and different things. But it's a user generated content site. And so that's really tough to stay on a public platform, any of these ad platforms, because people are crazy and post the worst of everything. Like, so you
it's
get you
it's
get
kind of nice to hear
censored
someone
pretty
admit
quick.
that.
Yeah, it's so hard managing the humans on that platform, on our website. We're always getting like contacted by lawyers constantly saying you got to take down this or that content. Like they have automated things that I didn't even know existed, but it's like you can register your photos, or like models do this, I guess, because we've gotten contacted by their lawyers all the time. They'll register their photos with this digital rights. I guess the DMR stuff, digital right or DRM. Uh, so those will be like this library of all their content, and they got it, you know, tagged. And I guess they have bots that crawl the internet looking for people who are illegally posting or sharing their content. And
It's
so
it's
it
such a common
automatically
thing.
sends us, yeah, it automatically sends us these emails saying we got to take whatever content down on whatever URL. And so that's a constant thing with that project. But I guess that's kind of the pain of being a website that size, where anybody can post anything unless our internal controls filter it out or our human moderators filter stuff out. Um,
That's
but
a
it's
lot.
wild.
That's a lot to take on. We're slightly running short on time now, Priest. So I'd really like to ask you, out of all the people that you've spoken to on the First Customers podcast, are there kind of common threads? Are there common regrets or common just any commonality? Is there something
Yeah.
that when it pops up, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this comes up a lot.
Yeah. So the kind of overall pattern with first customers um, that comes up. Well, first, the context of the show is talking to entrepreneurs about how they got their first customers. So we talk to all types of businesses,
Love it.
from SaaS to manual labor type businesses. And because of this period where I took all this experimentation time and everything, I experienced the pain of going from no customers to trying to figure out how to get that first customer. And that was a very visceral, real experience for me during that time. And so that was kind of the reason I started the podcast. It was like, I want to learn how other people are doing this, how they're starting something and getting that first customer, because there's got to be, like you're saying, some patterns that I'll learn. And also there's the networking and things like that you're talking about for this podcast. And so the common things kind of get reduced down to basic principles of marketing, like define your target audience, connect with that audience physically, if possible, like in person, and then learn from their conversations, their feedback, listen well to that target audience and adjust what you offer to kind of line up more with what their needs are, their desires, or whatever it is, your product or service. Take that client feedback or that potential customer feedback and use it in your targeting, your messaging, whatever it is. And that seems to be that, even though that's kind of three simple things: define your target audience, connect with them, and to use their feedback in your product or service. But that seems to be kind of the little niche, little secret that keeps showing up. The people who know their target audience the best and connect with them the most. Like this one guy sold his business for like $200 million. And the only marketing he ever did was like an annual event, or like an event every, maybe a couple times a year, where just his customers were invited, and they would end up upselling each other on the additional services or different aspects of the product that their company offered. And it became like this,
Which one was
thing
that?
that everybody looked forward to.
I want to specifically go back and listen to that one. What was the, no?
That
I'm.
was
What's the
that was the
title?
episode with John Darbyshire,
Or
and I don't
Derbyshire.
remember the number at the moment, but
Oh,
his
I'll find it.
current company is Smart Suite, and I don't remember the name of his original company, but it was a perfect example of, he was using his personal network to meet people and came up with the whole business idea because of a need that he discovered in the market, and designed a solution for it in the early web days, and dominated without running a single ad. It was crazy.
That's brilliant. We're going to have to draw it to a close, unfortunately. But I was at a meeting, like a community group that we're setting up here in Ipswich just to celebrate the town and creativity. And one of the colleagues, somebody I work with regularly, he's done several startups and exited. He's someone I consider as quite successful. He was saying that the thing that he's learned the most in the last 6 months is go offline.
Yeah.
Meet with people, be an actual human being, because that
Right.
will now, there's now so much online noise. That's now
Yeah.
what's going to connect. And I'm a firm believer with it, especially with regards to promoting my own SEO agency. That I think that little nugget you gave us there about the three things is so powerful, and it's such a lovely note to end on, because I want people to remember those bits. So there's several things that I wanted to speak to you about, like AI and your music, because we're both musicians.
Oh yeah.
Just quickly, what do you play?
Bass, mainly bass guitar, and then hey, there we
So
go.
for podcast listeners, I'm
Yeah.
pointing at a bass that I've got. Oh, and actually, there's a Strat here as well.
Yeah. But like me and my family, we just had our first little jam session with the kids last night, actually. And so I'm on guitar, like acoustic, and my son's learning bass, my daughter's learning drums, and my wife was on the keys, and
That is so
just
cute.
had a good little jam session.
There's do you know the band Crowded House?
Nope. I'll
Oh,
have
there's
to
a
check
band.
it out.
They were huge, and they were big in America in the '90s. But the main guy, Tim, he's started touring with his family. His two boys
Oh, that's
are in
cool.
the drum and in the band, and so his wife. They are now Crowded House, pretty much. But we could go
That's
rattling
awesome.
on, and unfortunately, we were actually run over. But I was thoroughly enjoying talking to you, Priest. So I'm going to put
Yeah,
some
this was
notes in
fun.
the show notes so people can find out more about you. And do you want to leave us with a final thought?
Hey, this life is short. You know, it's crazy times in the world if you zoom out. So as you're hustling or working, whatever you're doing, wherever you're listening to this show, remember the people that you care about the most. Take time to talk to them, engage, try to be present, because like we're saying, the digital world is overwhelming these days. You can get flooded with notifications, and there's never ending tasks now. The work day never ends anymore, because you can always access everything online from your devices. So yeah, to leave people with something, say, hey, make sure you disconnect, be present, look into your kids' eyes every once in a while, and yeah, don't forget what life's about.
That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to say goodbye now. Would you like to say goodbye?
See ya.